Hello and welcome to The Voice Vibe. I am your host, Philippe Hall, and today I have a special guest joining me today who is traveling the world, meeting with voice professionals from all kinds of different genres and different nations, doing active research, and is also a teacher in my intensive program, The Big Five Coordinations of Singing. And I'm really excited to introduce her to you today. We had a conversation about this, and I just find it so fascinating. What's going on in the world of voice? So, without further ado, I'm going to ask Lisa to join us here. Lisa Popiel, how are you today?
Everyone, I'm doing great. Thank you.
Seems like with all the blessings of technology, there's still some delays, but we are ready to go now. And thank you for joining me. It's been a pleasure working with you in the Big Five intensive training. All the
Thank you.
singers have been really enjoying your classes.
Wonderful. Well, I really appreciate the chance to share some of my experiences and my interests regarding what's happening in the world in terms of uh, singing styles, universities, colleges, schools, private schools. What's going on in terms of opera versus musical theater versus pop versus jazz, and kinds of different kinds of work that people are doing, and where the work is increasing and where it's decreasing in the world. I'd like to also chat about some of the differences between the American music market and the European market. I'm I'm not an expert in all countries and all things. I've been for 30 years. I've been going to international conferences, and have met so many wonderful people who are singers, teachers, a lot of teachers, voice scientists, and I grill them basically with with questions about what's going on in their country, what are their interests, where are they at in terms of their science, what they're most interested in, why they're at the conferences. Recently, I spent a month in Europe and presented in Paris, in Istanbul, and in Athens, and also in online. So there are four conferences in a month there that I participated in and had a chance to, to find out what people are into and what opportunities or not are available in their countries. I didn't know if you wanted to start with any questions or if you'd just like me to dig into some of the more interesting points. I'm assuming that our listeners are more of the popular music types, and that a lot of our listeners will be singers versus teachers. But I'm I always think when you're a singer, it's not steady work. It's hardly ever steady work, and you can't, you may not be hireable at 60 or 70, and if you don't want to retire, you're going to be teaching. I mean, that just seems like the obvious next step, or other way to make a living while you're a professional singer waiting for your next gig. And so learning about teaching, learning how to serve the interests and needs of amateur singers or beginners or even children, anybody who's willing to pay to learn from your ability and your expertise, is valuable for people who say, "I'm never going to teach." Never say never when somebody wants to give you some money because they really like the way you sing and they heard you in a club and they go, "Could you show me some stuff?" The answer should be yes, but you want
Yeah,
to know,
that's
the
great.
best way to do that.
That's perfect. I've heard that from a very famous singer. Also, I was working with at an opera house, a big opera house in Germany, and he just had a really big voice. And one of the things he said is, we're lucky. People, if anybody wants to pay to hear you, just say thank you and give them your very best. And the same thing with teaching is passing on knowledge. I mean, I was definitely one of those young artists that said, I'm not going to teach. That's not my focus now. I want to perform around the world. And I worked hard and I did that. And yes, it is up and down. It is always inconsistent. So you need to use that time in between to improve your skill set and become more competitive. And also, I made the decision to teach and share my experience, and everything I do now is pretty much dedicated to helping the next generation of singers. But that was a decision I made also because of uh, family. Traveling around the world, I also had the feeling, you need to be at home a little bit more. Otherwise, someone else is going to raise your kids, and you might be on television traveling around the world, and big star. But hey, your kids might need you, and that's a personal choice. And I've done that, and I'm really happy about the training I got. So those are very wise words. I love hearing about all the places you go and meet other people. It's something that I'm very passionate about myself. One of my dream scenarios for life is exactly that. Just travel around the world to different cultures, different places, talk about the voice, share my knowledge with them, and learn from them, and all this discoveries. So it's very fascinating. There are a lot of singers out there that may be considering a university education, a lot of people that want to teach in the future that might be considering a university education versus or another educational path. And there are a lot of people, including myself during my career, that not really aware of all of the updates and the research and new things going on. And now I really try and do my best to stay updated all the time. But it is a full-time job to do that. So it's going to be a fascinating conversation. Yeah. Um, I share your thoughts with us. Like you've been to all these places. And I like that the comparison or the awareness of different things going on in different markets, and there's much more um, here in America. Everything, the classical singing training. We have some great classical singing training, some wonderful programs, but the enrollment's really going down compared to contemporary singing styles, and the universities don't seem to be keeping up on that demand, so they're losing enrollment. And I think that is an important thing, an important shift that in my opinion, academia in the United States and universities needs to either make that shift or that jump to appeal to the singers that want to sing now in new styles. Otherwise, they're going to lose their programs.
It's sad, but and the main reason for this is that the U.S. government does not support opera in the U.S. It's not funded like it is so generously in countries like Germany and Austria and Italy. I believe in Italy. I shouldn't say that for sure, but I would think that's it's probably a UNESCO heritage activity. So I would think it's supported. Now, opera is supported primarily privately in the U.S. By wealthy donors, but it keeps it elite. It keeps it from the general public. So the general public is not, they've never heard it. Seats are very expensive for the most part. Smaller opera companies close. Um, I did a little search on this and found out that internationally, even though it's very hard to estimate how many people are actually can actually be considered professional, that professional opera singers, it's estimated that compared to all the other singers who are making money, it's less than 5%, and that's not just in the US. It's internationally, which is a very small amount to be paying top dollar to go to one of the many well-regarded conservatories which focus on opera when there's no work or you have to move. And I'm not sure. There's something I wanted to ask you. It used to be that if you wanted to work in opera, you had to move to Germany, and I don't know if it's as easy now to do that
Mm,
as it used to, especially with these conservatories pumping out really talented, skilled singers.
yeah.
Uh, what's your input onto that about what's going on with Americans moving to Germany or Austria to sing opera?
Well, I can share my personal experience. I mean, personally, I actually went to Germany to do because somebody knew somebody that needed a tap dancing tenor for an operetta, and that's a rare skill set in even in Germany anywhere, but even in Germany. And they hired me for a summer, so I went for the summer and I did a couple pieces, kind of ignorant to the amazing opportunities for work in Europe. And then I discovered that, oh my gosh, there are a lot of big musicals there in Europe. And at this time, I was mainly interested in doing musicals. So I just went to an audition and I got hired. And I met people and I kept getting hired for really, really good work. So I stayed there. And later, the passion inside me awakened for opera, and I decided to study and get a master's degree in voice performance opera at a conservatory in Germany. And people that knew me, because I had established myself as fairly well known as a musical singer all across Germany, they didn't want to give me a chance to sing opera. So I changed my stage name and went and auditioned under another name at
Wow.
theaters that didn't know me, and then they hired me for their opera work. So it's very fascinating. But I describe it like this. It used to be, we have that song. If you can make it there, you make it anywhere. New York, New York. Well, in the opera world, it's Germany. If you can make it in Germany, you can make it anywhere because the entire world is going there because they have such great programs and, like you said, funding. They have what's called a Kulturmandat, which means that every city is responsible to provide cultural education to their citizens. And part of the taxes go to fund the cultural education for the citizens. So that's actually their job as the city theater or the state theater. It's not to make a profit, which is very different to America.
Mhm.
And they're always struggling with, hey, how do we make a profit and provide culture? Because they're sometimes, not always, but sometimes they can be at ends. So this piece is not going to make any money, but it's culturally important. So there's a lot more funding for that. And because of that, you have the entire world. You have the United States, South America, Russians, really the Asians, Australians, Africans, the entire world, and all of Europe is going there to compete. So it is stiff competition. And the great thing is they do hold auditions. I know that a lot of the theater directors in from around the world will go attend a couple auditions a year in New York, where you can audition for basically all the directors of the theaters, not all, but many, and a lot of talent gets taken from there. And that would be an excellent way for somebody that wanted to go to Europe to start. Another thing is you can go and audition for the conservatory programs as a non-German citizen, and if a professor likes you, then you can study there. And that's how a lot of the Koreans and Chinese and other nationalities come into German that are not EU nationalities, come into Germany, study, and from there they have some pretty great programs and educational opportunities. So you can also just move there and audition. So it's possible, but the safest ways to do it are audition first and go with a job. And they have a lot of collaborative
Mhm.
programs. For example, one of the theaters I worked at had a set program with a university program, a couple universities in Australia, and so they would take young artists as on an apprenticeship contract for a year and give them experience. It's a great way for the theater in Germany to save some money, and a great opportunity for the students to come. They had to audition, of course, and many of them stayed and continued on in under an employment contract. So it's a fascinating system. But there are 80 professional theaters that are funded, well funded. They're, of course, varying sizes. You have the big state theaters have an enormous budget, and that's where all the big stars sing. And in Austria, very well funded. Same thing in Switzerland, just fewer theaters. And across Europe, you have amazing theaters in Belgium and France and Italy, of course.
And
And
people show up, right? I mean, people actually, they
oh
can
yeah,
fill the seats.
yeah, they not everything's sold out, but it depends. They have their seasonal ticket holders and they're very well visited. And it depends. Like in Italy, it's just such a part of culture, and in Germany, it's the home of Mozart and Wagner. Well, some of the Austrians might argue with some of the nationalities, but Bach and Beethoven and just all these amazing composers. And the truth is that Berlin used to be the New York and the Paris, before the world wars happened. It was the place where every artist and composer and creator wanted to go. It was like LA and New York today. So you have all this fascinating history there, and it's well appreciated. Absolutely, people are proud of their city's theater. Any theater that thinks anything of itself has a nice opera house, and they
Mhm.
don't just they have an opera ensemble. They have a full-time employed orchestra. They have the technical crew. They have the costume department, the makeup department, the set building department, the dance company. It's the full time choir. So employment wise, wonderful opportunities, and it has to be funded. The budget of a small theater, it well exceeds the of a city theater, well exceeds by 2 or 3 times the budget of entire state, usually in the United States, and all of the U.S. state budgets shared between all of the artistic venues. So they're able to do more, but it's difficult. They're still trying to, they want to keep it going. Some theaters in smaller places have shut down.
Mm.
It's not as popular as it used to be. So they've integrated musicals and orchestral concerts. They're doing their best to bring in some commercial things that bring more money,
Mm.
and that they make more money on the musicals. And I did a lot of musicals there, and then they do on the opera, because those are like, opera costs money. It's funded, but it costs money. You don't make money on opera performances. You make money on the extra concerts. You make money on the musicals. You make money on those kind of things. So it's difficult, but it's there, and the support for it is wonderful, and that's why there's also an incredible amount of competition from the entire world going there.
Oh, I'm still glad to know that there's an option, that there is still an option for American opera singers.
Oh yeah.
Some of the one thing I've noticed in my travels talking to people is how much they look to the US for the best, the brightest, the most innovative. We think everybody hates us, and I'm sure there's a lot that's not untrue, but in the artistic community or the educational community, uh, being an American teacher has weight. And science. They want to know what we think. So a lot of these up and coming countries, like I'll be next year in Kazakhstan and Azerbaijan, and back to Romania for a couple of new cities, and Bulgaria. They look to us for what's what they should aspire to. So they're using us as particularly for commercial music as the role model, and also for science and medicine. I'm very involved with voice medicine, the Union of European Phoniatricians. I always present for them. They're very open. The science and the medical people in Europe are very open to trying things and spending time with people like me who says, I have an idea, let's look at this. A little more open, I would say, or more interested than in the US, where voice doctors are more compartmentalized. Yeah, maybe I haven't said that word before. Compartmentalized. They focus on surgery, or they focus on sinuses, but they don't think in terms of the big picture. I have a famous uh, Los Angeles laryngologist I'm working with now, who's doing singing lessons with me, and he's really interested in music, like, and that's just, I'll get back to that, sort of the requirements. If anyone wants to consider being a teacher at some point in their lives, or even open to that, things to know. So I'll come back to that. Uh, so um, there's it's still, even the commercial world of voice, it's still pretty hit or miss. It's often not a meritocracy. It's still, there's a lot of luck involved in getting a job, keeping a job. Uh, some of the things that used to be able to make money, like in the 70s, were jingles, doing commercials. They don't have much of that anymore. Uh, you can be a member of the union here. It's SAG-AFTRA. It's this combination of the SAG Screen Actors Guild and the American Federation of Television and Radio Artists. So it used to be AFTRA, and that was called the Singers Union. If you were a professional singer in the U.S., you were an AFTRA member. Well, some years ago, they combined with the film actors, and it's a more powerful union now. But there's different, the work's different because we don't have the same number of jingles, and we don't have the TV variety shows that we used to have
Yeah.
going back the 1960s, where a singer could, dance a little bit and be on the Lawrence Welk show or the Merv Griffin show. And so we don't have variety shows, as much television work. Um, it turns out the US represents over 40% of the global recorded music. That's a lot, considering we
Wow.
only have, 350 million people here compared to the rest of the world. So we are by far the world's largest recorded music market, which I think is very interesting. One of the things we have that for which there is work for singers who dance, very important. I'll talk more about that. Is a musical theater. Musical theater is expanding internationally, and I'm very excited about that. I was in Estonia recently, or a few years ago, and I asked about musical theater there, and they didn't know what I meant by the word musical theater. They weren't familiar with that. Maybe I should have said musicals, but I have a sense that that was not an English term they were familiar with, even though Phantom of the Opera, which is considered technically a musical, was in the Tallinn, the capital, sung in Estonian. And
Hmm.
but I guess they didn't think of that as being part of musical theater. So around the world, it's growing, and there's going to be more and more work for people. But almost as important, if not more important than singing ability, is dancing ability. Like you said, the ability to tap, to know jazz, to know ballroom, especially if you're starting out. They, in auditions at the
Yeah.
professional level, you come in as a singer, but they may have you do a dance audition first
Yeah.
before they even hear you sing. And I think singers who think, I think I'd like to do that, get into dance classes, learn, whatever do research, because it changes, about what are the most important dance skills to have. But off the top of my head, tap and ballroom would be the basics. Otherwise, they might not even hear you. You might not even get a chance to sing.
Yeah,
And,
that's
and
difficult sometimes, you know. It's true. If you can dance well and you can sing, you will work the most. I mean, that was what I did. I did a lot of ballroom because I loved it. Not even before I was thinking of going into the business, but I did a lot of dance training, tap, jazz, ballet, everything, and it allowed me to work because when you go to audition for a musical, there are a lot of jobs in the chorus. There are not that many jobs for soloists. And even though most of the musical programs today in the US, I've observed, as well as in Europe, they're training singer actors. So they want for the roles stronger actors, which is great. I think that's wonderful, and strong singers. But the singing is actually taking a second place more and more. And but those are the roles, and there are not many roles in any given piece. So the meat of the work is in the ensemble, and if you're in the ensemble, you've got to be able to dance and sing, and then you will probably work consistently. But even as a soloist, they'll have separate auditions. This is the dancing singer audition, and this is the singer movement call. I think that's really fascinating. So even as a singer actor, it's good to have some movement skills. Something interesting I just want to throw in there that it's in Germany. Musiktheater, music theater is how they describe opera and operetta. It's like the whole term. So some
Mm.
people over there, if you say musical theater, they might not associate that with musicals, right? So
Mm-hmm.
because it's a term that's used. Musiktheater is opera in Germany. They don't say
Oh, that.
opera like we do, as it's a different thing. Yes, they know it's a different genre, but for them, opera is the Musiktheater, the music theater, and musicals is just part of that. So it's also fascinating.
Good to know. That's good to know. I have also been interested, and I ask people at the conferences, when a musical comes to your main town, is it sung in English or is it sung
Mm,
in the native language? And if it's a major city in Europe, they're often done in English, and there are English language theaters. They're called international theaters, which may do it in English. And there are others that will do them in their native language, particularly if it's they don't English isn't commonly used.
yeah,
But as small a population as we have, English is the international language, which is so convenient for us. So every conference I go to is in English. And sometimes when I'm presenting, they'll give me one. I've had as many as two translators where I will speak slowly and clearly and remove slang from, put a slang filter in so I don't use expressions that for which I might find something more clearly translatable. And then I wait for the translation. But for the most part, it's all in English. All the presentations, workshops is done in English, and people are becoming more and more comfortable. They just speaking English off the top of their head,
yes,
and the young people know all our expressions. I've been in Sweden several times, and their English is superb. The young
oh,
people,
yeah,
and they write pop songs in English and sing pop songs really, really well. So musical theater is definitely a growing market for people who want to work. Um, Unfortunately, they require contracts, a certain amount of time, whether let's say you're touring, and a 6 month contract, especially if you're touring or traveling around. So that's a lot of time, and some people can't or won't or don't feel comfortable committing to a show for 6 months. I've heard of 1 year contracts. I've heard of 3 month contracts, but mostly what I've heard, again, I'm not an expert because I haven't done it, is a 6 month contract, which is much easier if you're young, you're still living with your parents, or if you have an apartment someplace and you can sublet it and you can just travel around and sock away your money. One of the vocal skills that is so important once you get the job is maintaining your voice, because singing 8 shows a week is tremendously difficult. Even if you're in the chorus, it's a lot of singing,
hmm,
and there's a lot of socializing with all your friends and backstage. And so, how to become a vocal monk, and how to not have to leave or be replaced because you've lost your voice, becomes almost more important than just doing the show, because you could do the show in your sleep. It's how do you keep your health up, how do you not get sick, and how do you maintain your voice and not get voice damage? What some
yeah,
kind of lesion, and by lesion I mean uh, nodules, polyps, cysts, scar tissue, or just general swelling, which really isn't a lesion, but it's it's the predecessor to having a tissue that really shouldn't be there. So that's a huge challenge. Some people, they're bulletproof. They're like, they can just do anything with their voice and their voice is fine. Other people like me are more fragile, like a little flower. And so uh, I'd have to be, and I don't have a big head or big ribs. Those seem to be the two things which provide the big.
it's
We talked about that. I saw this guy at a
yeah.
party recently, and he didn't have a huge head, but he had huge ribs, and you could hear him talking from across the room. I had to put my earplugs in because he was so loud. I said to the person next to me, I said, big ribs. Anyway, so and if you the bigger the ribs, the bigger the head, you can sing more loudly with less effort. So that's a little bit about musical theater. And there are schools in the U.S. Which do musical theater training, but not as much as you think. And but I haven't investigated all the curriculums and how much of it is dance and how much of it is acting. But you really need to be what's called, if you haven't heard the phrase before, a triple threat. And it seems to be dancing, acting, and singing. But as people's belting skills are getting better, and the bar is being raised, just like at the Olympics. People are sort of doing more and more difficult, higher notes than ever expected before. Used to be belt to a C, now it's belt to an E. But if it's a more R&B show, there's no limit. You can go really really high with your M1 or chest voice sound, and you've got to do it sometimes 2 shows a day. So that's a little bit about my musical theater. It's developing. Another great way to make a living for a commercial singer is our cruise ships. And if you're following the news, you see that there are more and more cruise ships, more and
Yeah.
more out there, more and more baby boomers who, with time to spare and money to spend, who who want good entertainment. And I was on the new Sun Princess, the Princess cruises, and it left Athens and went to 7 days through the Mediterranean to Barcelona, and the singers were quite expert. They also had flying silk gymnasts. There were people who played. Everyone was good except a female duo who played really bad violin, screechy, too loud, not together. They were bad, but everyone else was quite first rate. And they have these cover bands, and this is a term I wanted to introduce today, because a lot of pop singers who are singer songwriters aren't familiar with the terms top 40 or cover bands. Cover has become a little bit more commonly used, I believe, as a term than top 40, because we don't have radio play, is a big part, it's um, as a part of our national consciousness, that, well, what is the number one song in the country today on the radio? It's just, that's sort of because of streaming. So cover means that you are singing not your own songs, you're singing other people's songs. And cruise ships are a great way to do that. Great bands, often a guy and a girl, and you're not singing that much. Like on this last cruise, I heard this one band, they were so good. And they were older. These singers, they were not 20-year-olds. They were 30s, 40s. Um, and they had also one gal, I saw one performance where they had the rock singing female, uh, and the rest of the band was playing rock. But what I've learned is that if you're in a cover band anywhere, you need to know about 200 songs. Now they do have their iPad on a stand in front of them so they can check the words, but basically that's the prerequisite, is that you can memorize 200 songs. I can't do that. I can't memorize barely one song, 2 songs. I can do Girl from Ipanema because I learned it when I was like 8 years old. So I can actually, and it's short, so I can get through Girl from Ipanema pretty reliably. The national anthem, Star Spangled Banner, yeah, I don't trust myself. So cover songs are not for me. But they also have these contracts, these 6-month contracts, living in a very small, not very chic room cabin on a ship. Some people love it. Some people find it lonely and depressing. And they
Mm.
don't really care that they're going to the same. And the food, my God, the food is so good that you just blow up. Even if you try to diet, there's just food everywhere all the time,
Yeah.
and it's delicious. So, um, so anyway, cruise ships and musical theater internationally are growing, and there's work. For singer-songwriters, there are a number of growing programs, university programs, where you could get a bachelor's. I saw a couple where you could get a master's, but mostly it's a bachelor's degree, a, a, a 4-year degree in pop singing, and they do song, but it's often linked with songwriting and music theory, and they might have a recording studio there. So you're learning about uh, how, what, not just doing recording on your laptop, but an actual recording studio, which is what I grew up with since I was 11 years old. I was so hooked. It was, this was before you could do anything on your own. Um, so there's, and also jazz, the jazz vocal curriculum is different than the pop vocal curriculum. It's slightly different because there's just jazz has, and I really think that some of the reason that jazz is not more popular is because of bebop, because of atonal jazz that started 50, 60 years ago. I think it lost an audience, and a lot of that was non-vocal.
Yeah.
So I think we've lost, and there probably are other reasons. Maybe it always, real jazz always had a small audience, specialized audience. I think if you're a jazz singer, you have more luck in Europe. Like the French love American jazz
It's
singing.
true. True.
They'll pay for that. But here you're going to have smaller audiences, but the ability to scat and the musical ability is needs to be much, much higher. There's no auto tuning. It's and the expression is different than being a pop singer. Pop singing is really for young people, and jazz singing is really for people who've lived. If you're young, like Jane Monheit, when she started recording and touring, and she was like 23, she was great, but people didn't give her credit for that credibility, because how can you be a great jazz singer and be that young? It's the kind of style that comes from multiple divorces, alcoholism, the the real stuff that happens to people, and the broken hearts. And how many times has your heart been broken at 23? Well, mine was actually quite a few, but it was, yeah, I had a little problem with that. But my point is that if you love jazz, there's room for you artistically out there. The jazz world needs you, but it's popular means popular, that it
Mm.
pop means popular, that it's going to appeal to a larger audience. Uh, Something else I wanted to mention was accents. When I was in Italy, I know it just sounds like I'm bragging all the time, humble bragging. What can I say? This is what we're talking about today. So
Yeah.
I go to Italy. They want to sing a pop like and sound like an American, but they know that their accent is holding them back. They don't know what they're doing wrong, but
Mm.
they know they haven't mastered the American accent. So in future programs that I do, including a teacher training program, I'm sort of everything in my brain done, as video courses that I may or may not start next year. One of them will be the different American dialects used, because this isn't just one American dialect that's used.
Right.
There in America, I think I have 5 different ones that are used in all styles of singing that I might do, where I would sing in English. But there's 2 basic ones that are used in popular music, and so I think that they would appreciate that information, because people want to sound like Americans. They look up to us, they think we're cool, they think we're hip, and if they're going to do English, and they do, they they don't want to sound like they're faking it. So there's a place out there for more discussion and talk and
Mm.
training in the 2 main dialects used. One I call standard, and one I call soul, and the soul has sort of taken over. The soul, just a quick example, since we probably have the time. The standard, the most typical example of the standard American dialect is the diphthong, the double vowel sound IE. And it's very common in English, as in the following words: I, my, I, try, sigh, night, life. So they all have the same "ai"
Yeah.
combination. And that's the way most of us speak. It's what you hear on the news, and it is a traditional pronunciation prior to maybe the 50 Elvis, so prior to Elvis. And then with the influence of African American music and being loved by the young white audiences, that aspect of that accent from the South started to permeate and is now considered normal, regular, most often heard. And I call it the soul dialect. And now this diphthong goes from I to I, night, I, my, I. And you want to stay with it. So if you're doing a song that uses this dialect, you want to make sure that if you do this pronunciation, that you continue it through the rest of the song. There are a couple of other sort of main ones, but the I versus I is definitely a thing. And you might not learn that at the university, when you're studying classical voice at a conservatory. There is one more that is used, but I don't recommend it. And it's just where it's not a diphthong at all. It's just ah.
Mm.
I love my life. It just sounds artificial, like I'm trying too hard to be cool. So I teach the I, and it really makes a difference when people are consistent, pick one and are consistent. But they're both used. So that's a little bit about accents when people want to sing in English. Another thing, I was in Shanghai a few years ago, and uh, there was some discussion. I wanted to learn more about, well, what about pop? What about, and they bring what they said was, we bring in Koreans from South Korea. We bring in South Korean producers
Yeah.
to teach our young people how to sing in a pop way. So I don't know if there's a C pop yet, but this
Yeah.
was at the high K pop.
Yes. Yeah.
They
They're
didn't bring in
very.
the J they didn't bring in the Japanese, interestingly, but they brought in the South Koreans.
Yeah, they're very good. They're very good. It's very popular at the moment. I even have some clients that are living in. One client lives in Germany that's working on K-pop with one of their programs just to get in there, and it's really fascinating. I'd like to just, before we jump into the China connection and your experience there, also just talk about briefly these accents. I actually had a client from Italy that does wonderful cover, easy pop jazz, and working specifically with me on her English pronunciation. And it's very fascinating. I mean, we can talk for a moment on how important vowels are in singing, because part of the difficulty with getting rid of an accent. There's two parts. It's one, you have to be able to hear the nuance of that vowel, and the other one is you have to learn to position your tongue, your mouth, your vocal tract slightly differently to make that happen. And there are a lot of really great singing advantages to being able to do that, right? The vocal folds, there's less stress on the vocal folds if you're on the right vowel. You got better acoustics. It sounds more authentic often, and it's just easier to do.
And it's really hard when you come from a language like Italian that has, one, two, three, four, five, seven vowels, I believe. And we have more than that. So we have sounds that their mouths have, and working with someone from Iran or someone from India or someone from Russia. Russians seem to have the most difficulty at reducing, forget eliminating an accent, but even reducing accents. I've sort of given up on that, but given up hope. But and I have lists, practice words for each of these, particularly the vowels that they've never made before, such as a vowel we take, for granted, I, what used to be called the short I, the I sound. It's very common in English, and I is not a sound that most people in Europe make.
Right.
And
My
the
wife
other
is
one is
my wife is
really,
French. Sorry,
oh,
we're
she,
talking over each other
oh,
a little bit, but my wife is French, and she cannot hear really the difference between I and it.
I. And so it comes out somewhere in between, or
Yeah, she
or
won't
E.
say hit, she'll say hit. or
It.
bit and
Which
beat. They're totally
it,
different
it,
meanings in
it,
English,
yeah,
but for her it sounds pretty much the same. So
the
it's
same.
it's a
Yes.
constant challenge. Yeah.
And another one that is really tough is uh. And I've worked with a lot of Americans on because we weren't taught this way. We learned to speak by listening to our parents speak. So we don't actually know what we do. So the vowel has many different spellings in English, which is very confusing. I'm sure, like book, should, um, well, there's all the woods, could, but there's other ones. I can't think of them right now, but there are several different spellings for the sound, or even the sound, the
Yeah.
which is people think, oh, it's not that common. Actually, it's in the word the.
Yeah.
The with an e is the sound, and the word a book is So is probably the most common vowel sound in English, but people think e is or something. So I have sheets, just practice sheets, where I just on my voice memo, because I teach online only now anyway, is on my voice memo, I just go through the list. I say the word as perfectly as possible and I leave a little space for them to practice. Whether they practice or not is beyond my my skill or capacity, but it's right there. So ear training and mouth training and imitation is so important. And
Yes.
that's why I think that I'm a big proponent of seeing teachers being able to demonstrate accurately what they want their students to do. Because I've had so many teachers
Yes.
who were struggling themselves to show me something. And I remember when I started out, I'd struggle. I'd say, oh, I can do it better. I can do it better. Let me try it again. And by the third or fourth time, I got what I wanted them to do. This is not good enough. It was, write it down, Lisa, and practice that. So it doesn't, you minimize, maybe
Yeah.
you'll always be a challenge.
It's so
It'll never
important,
be
isn't
second
it?
nature, but work harder, Lisa, if you're going to be showing people what you want them to do. I had some other, it's actually a great time for a little plug because I have a book and it's available on my website um, as a download.
Oh,
And
cool.
it talks a lot about all these different ways you can make money as a singer, and I interviewed people who do that and what kind of money. I mean, people don't like to talk about money, but come on, it money's and amounts and are you going to eat
Yeah.
or be able to pay the rent's kind of important. So I'd ask them, I said, what is the range of money uh, for that particular job? So that alone, I think, is really interesting.
Yeah.
I've
Very.
got a new chapter in my revised edition in the download that's about social media and how incredibly important that has become, for better or worse. In the past, when I was an artist in the '80s, I had to have I had a PR person, a PR specialist that made things happen with famous people and parties and lots of uh, uh, publicity. The PR stands for public relations. I had a manager. There's the question of what's an agent? How is an agent different from a manager? So all these different team people are in the book, and
Cool.
often people who are at a pretty high level will have all these people. There'll be record company executives. What does A&R mean? What role do they play? Radio promotion, it still exists. How do I get my song? What has to happen to get my song heard on the radio or in streaming platforms, that I don't have to do everything myself. So
That sounds
there's a
like
lot in the
a
book.
valuable resource.
And it's simple. It's a very, it's a very short book, um,
Hmm.
but it's a lot of meat and very little fat in it. Another thing in the book that was that I took, and this was written a few years ago, as I looked at 10 different famous singers who, let's, for lack of a better term, made it in the business.
Yeah.
And I did 5 women and 5 men. And I researched their history and how did they get from nothing to their first hit. And the stories, you got to read it to believe it. I mean, I was stunned to see how much rejection some of these people have gone through and how much work and they've had to do, just to build it to the point where they got lucky and or got, or were skilled enough. And again,
Yeah.
and you can't deny that there's a lot of luck, because you might be one person away from a life-changing decision that's going to, impact your, whether you have a career or not. But like Katy Perry's story was just shocking. This record deal that fell through, or this record deal where she was dropped. I mean, just multiple record deals. It talks also, the book, there's more on, well, what is a record deal and what's involved? What am I signing here? When I signed a record deal in 1984, there were things about it that I thought were so unfair. And I'll tell you that the main thing that just shocked me was that I was writing songs, and they wanted the publishing, meaning 50% of any song that I wrote that made money. As a publisher, they would take what's called my publishing share, 50% of the value of the song, not just during the course of the contract, but in perpetuity. So the contract ends, uh, I'm no longer with them, and the contract said, was asking me to sign that for the rest of my life they would take my publishing. Now they sold to Sony, nothing ever happened, but I took this to my advisor at the time, and I said, this is just crazy. And he
Yeah.
said, sign it. He said, you may never, just sign it. You may never get another opportunity again. So I signed it. And so there's that kind of thing. I mean, who do you go
Yeah.
for advice? How many people do you know who've had a record deal? How entertainment attorneys, how do I find an entertainment attorney? How much do they charge? How can I get them to charge less? And so all of these sort of practical things about building a career. How do I find a manager? How do I know if somebody who wants to manage me is competent to manage
Yes.
me? These are
Yes.
all things. And when you're on your own, you have to sleep sometimes. There's only so many hours of the day that you can do your videos and your daily Instagram and your other social media responsibilities, and booking your own gigs. There's a lot that people are
Oh, yeah.
expected to do now. You're expected to be your own recording engineer, your own songwriter or collaborative songwriter. You have to put out content constantly. You have
Yeah.
to try to get booked at music festivals. Um, it's
It's a
it's
lot of
not
work.
for it's a lot of work, and it's not for the unhealthy or the unambitious. It's
Yes.
if you're just kind of like, "Oh, I just kind of want to put my foot in. I like sitting in my bedroom and writing my little Okay, great, enjoy yourself, but don't fantasize that you're going to have a professional career. You almost need blood on your teeth to have a professional career. You have to have almost a screw loose, like something, like some childhood trauma that makes you need approval that you will do anything, you will step on any toes, you will do anything to get the applause and the love. This is a mental illness, but a lot of people who are really successful have that mental illness, um, and we get to enjoy their art, but but
It's
I
fun.
wouldn't want to be that person who's constantly working for hits. And so when I quit the music business, it was probably a blessing, because I've been a much better, more effective teacher than I think I would have been. And it's been everything I've ever learned, from acting and dance and languages and piano and composition and song, everything ever I've done, I've been able to to do something good, instead of just stand up there,
Yeah.
look sexy and cute, and sing some songs and make a ton of money, which actually would have been kind of nice. But the point is that if you have students, or people who are listening to this, who go, oh, I think that sounds really fun. No, it's a
Yeah.
constant work, and there's a time limit. I've had people come to me, students, and they're in their late 30s, and and they're kind of average looking, and they don't, they're good singers, but they're,
Not going to be the
keep it
pop.
high.
It's tough. I also say, I mean, people ask me all the time, and I just have a conversation, a real conversation with them. I just say, look, if you absolutely feel pulled or called to do this, like this is what you're meant to do, and you you have to have this passion for it, then do it. if you need security or any kind of regularity in your life, don't do it because it's up and down, it's chaotic. You have to be willing to be poor. You're gonna invest a lot of money and a ton of energy, and the only way that anybody maintains motivation to do that is their personal conviction, that's their passion for it. Everybody told me to quit. I mean, even when I got to the university, my acting professor said, I don't think this is going to work out for you. And I
Wow.
said, well, I'll learn what I need to do because I had that, oh yeah, well, this is
Hmm.
what I'm going to do. I will learn the skills. And when I finished the first year out of university, I worked as a professional actor. So accomplishment and then
Mm.
going into the business, but it's hard, you know. I know a lot of talented kids that will go out and they won't get hired after 6, 7, 8 auditions and they think they're not good enough and they quit. That's just the name of the game. You have to keep going and going and going, and then you will find the people that you work with. Everybody told me I was insane to switch from a successful musical career into opera and take the time to do that, but I was deeply
You had the
passionate
passion.
and I
And passion
worked.
chooses us. We don't choose it. It just like a bug
Yeah,
bite. It gets you. And there are some people who'll say, I'm going to give this X amount of time. I'm
yeah.
going to give it everything I've got because I'm young, because I feel like I have what it takes. I'm going to give it. And and other people say, I'm not going to give myself a plan B. I am not going to
Yeah,
consider any time limit on it. So, but that's again, that's the way
it's a
they're
mentality.
wired.
It's a mentality thing. I
Also,
got
when
a
you're working with,
question real quick. We had Horatio pop up this question. I think it'd be good to talk about because it's a question I get a lot. I'm sure you've heard the question about vibrato. Um, can you see that? Can anyone
yes,
develop vibrato? I've tried for a long time and it seems like I'm missing something. Maybe there are physical restrictions. I can do a hammer vibrato, meaning the cable
mhm.
guy. Um, so yeah, can anyone learn
I
vibrato?
I've only met, I've only worked with one person out of many thousands but it was a long time ago, and I didn't know all the tricks I know now. But no matter what I tried with him, he couldn't do a reliable vibrato. But that was only one, and there was nothing unusual about him that I noticed. Um, so I love your question. I think it's really well formulated. I would not give up. Um, I would not give up trying techniques. Sometimes you're one, like in the recording studio.
Yes.
They'll say it's not working. Nothing's working. What's going on? Where's the sound? And so there's this saying in recording studios: you're only one button away from a solution. So it could be that you're one hack or one trick away from doing it. But the main thing I think to for somebody who doesn't have vibrato is that you must try to get this to wiggle. If there's no movement here, you will hammer. Yeah. And I even have done it with fingers where they do it themselves, or if I'm in person with them, I'll wiggle it. I don't know if I have, I just did a 2 hour, was it 2 hours or an hour and a half presentation for the Beijing Central Conservatory of Music. And it was only on vibrato. I'm happy to send
Awesome.
it to you.
Yeah, let's
Um,
talk. Let's just say
and
basics.
it's
What
my
what
most
happens? What
comprehensive.
happens when there's
Well,
vibrato?
it's my most comprehensive. It's very deep, and it's not none of it's proven because in order to really look, we need to put needles in these different muscles. But some of the characteristics, everyone has different meaning. Not everyone uses all the same mechanisms, but one of the missing mechanisms for vibrato is the idea that for most people, the larynx itself wiggles up and down, and if it doesn't wiggle, then they they have a vibrato problem. So there's wiggling of the larynx itself. There's a function called visoring. This is the thyroid cartilage. This is the cricoid cartilage, and right there, oh, let me do that. Right there is a joint, and so some people with faster vibratos don't wiggle their voice box. This is my belief. They don't wiggle, but these move like this. So I think, and I think I do both. But people with really fast vibratos, but still good, you can still hear the pitch change. They're doing visoring.
Yes.
And people with slower vibratos, like mine, tend to have more of the whole box is moving up and down. There are also a number of muscles here. They're called the suprahyoids, and that means the muscles above the hyoid bone, which is right there, is the hyoid bone under the tongue, that can move in different ways. So there are different vibrato types. There's ones where these muscles on me are actually alternating, creating a movement, a lateral fluctuating movement of the voice box. So not only is it moving up and down, it's also doing like that little shaka hand gesture. So when I do my classical vibrato, I can feel those muscles alternating without my permission. They just do it to make the sound. So there's a lateral motion possible. There's a different motion where if I take these muscles and I move them together, meaning on, off simultaneously, it makes the hyoid bone pull forward in a fluctuating way, and it creates it eliminates the lateral movement, and
Mm-hmm.
it gives me what I call a jazzy vibrato, the one I like to use for jazz. And this is what that sounds like. Hey. If you were here, Horatio, and you touched my muscles, you'd feel them go on and off, and you'd feel the hyoid bone pulling forward.
So
So
cool.
there's vibrato speeds, different vibrato types. Some people can do a lot of different vibratos. Some people are lucky just to have one good one.
Yeah.
The window of speed, to me, of the ideal speed is much narrower than is considered in the literature. Like in China, one of the questions was that what they teach there is that vibratos can be as slow, and they only did classical. They didn't know anything about commercial voice, which I thought was not so good, but that's it. Lovely people, but they're kind of like way behind. Anyway, they in their literature they talk about vibrato speed. It could be as slow as 4 cycles per second. That means an uppy and a downy. As the pitch moves up, the pitch moves down. That's one cycle. That as little as 4 cycles per second is acceptable. Mm-mm. And as fast as 7. Mm-mm. To me, in our literature, we talk about between 5 and 7. I guess I should do it mere 5 and 7. Anyway, to me, 7 is just too fast. Some people won't mind it, the listener, but what if we could not only make a vibrato that sounds pleasant, is consistent, controlled, and it doesn't always just happen accidentally. I'm a big proponent of choosing when to do vibrato, not that it's just singing like they thought at the conservatory.
Yeah.
To them, and in our traditional classical world here, vibrato and singing are linked. And that's a problem. If they ever want to do commercial music, they have to learn how to do straight tone.
Yeah.
That's really hard because it doesn't feel right. It feels unnatural because they've
Yes.
trained themselves that singing and vibrato are the same kind of thing. Okay, but I digress. So I believe that our window of vibrato speed should be as narrow as 5.5 to 6.5. And the reason I say this is because the wider the range of vibrato speeds, you're going to lose people. You're going to lose audience. Goes, ugh, I don't like it. I don't know. I don't really like their voice. They don't know why. People don't know what vibrato is. I work with singers who come to me. They don't even know what a melody is. They don't know what rhythm is, what that means. They don't know what a tempo is or what beat is. They don't know what harmony is. It's amazing how many people, beginners, want to sing and they don't know the basics of music, which is shocking to those of us who had some kind of musical introduction, in kindergarten, but they didn't. For whatever, they came from another country, there was no music in their house, and so they don't know anything about things we take for granted as having been exposed to music. So that's my opinion, that if you're too fast, you're going to lose people. They don't know why, but they don't like your voice. And if it's too slow, you'll sound wobbly. and
Thank
we don't need to get into that. But there are other mechanisms going on, but the main ones are wiggling, rocking, as I call it, that lateral motion, and this other one where you can, and you anyway. There's many different kinds of vibrato, but it starts with wiggling and also making sure that the upper belly is firmed out, but that you can jiggle it at this. You put your free fingers on your magic spot, and as you're holding a soft. It's important to practice vibrato at a soft volume, not loud. You won't be able to do it. So you're holding a straight tone softly, and this goes out as I teach in support. Let me adjust my top as one needs to do on these formats. So I'm going to do, let me show it this way. Now, the key is to not to do it too fast. I should do it more slowly. He firms out for the sound. And I would say jiggle it, push in and out slowly, and see if you notice that there's wiggling going on.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing to be aware of is that if you have what I call hard closure or squeezed closure, where the chords are doing that, then the vibrato
Yes.
won't happen either. So you have to have a soft deduction, a soft closure, and just thinking I'm going to sing more softly, but with good support, usually does the trick. You don't have to like pick an adduction from my chart of 10 adductions. Just soft closure, a light closure, soft sound with good support, and then jiggle slowly and see if you can feel wiggling. And that can jumpstart the movement required for most people
Um,
to have vibrato.
Thank you. That's such a great detailed
Sorry,
answer.
like
And I'm
woo.
really happy that we got on the topic of vibrato because the people are looking for it. They're either looking to do it or looking to get rid of it. And I'm absolutely in agreement with you. I think that it's movement. You have to allow for some movement, and there's different tricks in creating the movement, and there's different things that will keep it from moving. So Horatio, reach out to me, reach out to Lisa. We can definitely help. And I think that's
Mhm.
also why in classical singing, the whole bel canto in this tradition, people used to say your vibrato will appear naturally. I don't believe that. But
Mm-mm.
the truth is, when the better you get at singing, the less tension you will have that could inhibit the vibrato.
Yes,
So then it can happen easier. So I think that's why they came up with that old saying, it will just come. Well, the better your technique gets, the less tension you have, the easier it is for things to move. I'll agree on that, but it's not
I
just
really,
magically appear.
yeah, and it's because people have been teaching the same techniques for what, 300 years, and
Yeah.
we didn't know anything, we couldn't see inside, so it was all image based, the flame, the flickering flame, or the ping pong ball on a fountain of air. And it worked for talented singers to get them to be, they were already singers. In the old days, if you were an opera singer, you would go and live at the teacher's house, and you would be with them all day every day for a period of time. It was a very intense, immersive system to prepare one for the operatic stage. And no life outside of opera.
It's
um,
funny
oh,
that
I want.
Horatio he did ask the question, and I didn't put it in the podcast, but you demonstrated exactly that. So you answered that question with the
Yeah.
solar plexus. Yeah, that's one method. There's another. There's a simple one where you just shake your voice a little bit. There's a
Oh
lot of
yeah,
tricks.
shoulder. Sometimes if there's tension here, that can inhibit free motion, so you could do that. I use hand gestures, where that's straight tone hand, and then there's different hand gestures there's whacking the water to have a slower vibrato. There's the vibrato fingers, where you quickly push the fingers away from your face, and that helps speed up a too slow vibrato. So hand gestures for a lot of people works beautifully. Other people, they're not kinesthetic, and it's one more thing they have to worry about.
You know what?
One
There's
more, and
there's
I'd say 90% of the time that hand gestures really work to elicit movement.
you can take one of these bands too and go ah, and just a
Oh,
stretchy band and shake it. They have
oh,
these.
I haven't seen that one. That's cool. Yes, and when you say fake, fake can be lots of different things. But if when you first start doing vibrato, you may think it's weird or ugly, and it may not be your final finished, perfect form. Um, but anything that's new feels scary and weird. So, and you may think of it as fake, but vibrato is fake. You see, people say it's natural. It is not natural. There are cultures in the world. If set me down in the Kalahari and I went, well, they're gonna, who knows what they're gonna do? They're gonna run probably. Not only am I holding a note in head voice, which is weird, but I'm doing this loud vibrato. So it's like, what is that? So
Yeah,
vibrato and head voice singing is a unique combination that we're used to if you've had classical training. But if you haven't been exposed to it, it's a truly odd thing. The
yeah,
only thing that's natural is talking and variations of talking. And vibrato is the only thing in singing that does not come from talking or giggling, hello, how are you? Oh, my little baby. That's head voice. So we do use that. We can talk in specialty situations with head voice. I went to my yoga class yesterday. I went, hi, and I went, oh, and I wasn't the only
yeah.
one who would kind of go up there. But vibrato is an ornament, and I
Hmm.
consider it to be a volitional ornament. Volitional meaning it's a choice. It's a choice a singer should make. And ideally, if you're singing different styles, if you adjust your vibrato for the style, that's that's cool, but it's not necessary to be appreciated as a singer. Again, if you have one good vibrato with it, not too slow, not too fast, and not all the time, then even classical singers now aren't using vibrato 100% of the time.
Yes,
That's not considered. It's more modern style of opera singing. You go, oh, that was straight. Oh, that was straight. They may be short, but they're like, oh, that was straight. That's
yeah,
what
yeah.
30% straight and 70% vibrato. So it's changing. Tastes and styles change over time.
Yeah,
I
thank
wanted to
you,
say,
Horatio. It's a great,
yeah, it's a
great
good
class. Give
question.
yourself some time. Like Elisa said, a lot of
Uh-huh.
singers think they're doing it wrong because they take a step in the right direction and they're not at their finished product. Well, you got to allow yourself to take the steps to get there. So for any singers, give yourself a little bit of time. As long as you're taking the steps in the right direction, then your outcome is inevitable.
And that's why having a voice teacher can be helpful because they can reassure you that you're on the right path,
Hmm.
that it's not as weird or ugly or strange as it may feel to you. And they go, no, that's okay, you're getting it. You're getting it. Now, don't touch your belly or don't pull on the strap or don't, let's see if you can remember the sound and the feeling of it and do it and just by standing there. So we're not only singing teachers not only act as professional ears, but we're also therapists. We also will let you know to not worry so much about certain things. When you pick which battles to pick, which battles to fight, and which battles say it's really not a problem. Like a sinus infection. I have a new student, and he had an infection. He had sinus surgery, and I've been investigating sinus surgery, so this is not something I've really given much thought to. And I went, people come to me with all kinds of medical issues relating to their voice, and I need to up my game so that I can give them some advice instead of I don't know, let me Google it and get back to you.
Hmm.
So I found out about the difference between balloon sinusplasty, where they put a balloon in and it just opens up some of the spaces in the sinuses here, versus septoplasty, where they straighten the bridge of the nose or repair the bridge of the nose if you were doing too much cocaine back in the day. Also, turbinate reduction surgeries, three different ways. I didn't know about this. turbinate reduction and how it really can change your voice,
Mm-hmm. Your
and how
resonance.
they can use a laser, and they can use a little tool which kind of goes in and drills out the extra drills and sucks out little additional tissue so you can breathe if you're having trouble breathing at night particularly. And that when you change the tissues of your inside your nose, that it can affect your voice. But
Yeah.
what this guy who was so freaking out about it because he felt his voice was so different, when I started working with him, his posture was crap. He didn't. Once I got him to stand up tall, and I showed him some support jobs: up, chest up, ribs out, upper belly magic spot gently firms out, lower belly goes in. The excessive nasality in his voice just disappeared. He sounded beautiful, I thought.
Yeah.
So, sometimes there's a problem, and it's not the cause of the problem is not what you think it might be. It has to do with going back to basics. So,
I do
but
have.
also if you sinus surgery, there might be some scar tissue which might not vibrate the same way, so it might feel different, but it still sounds good. So
Mm,
there's another issue is things can change, and if you age, women who are aging, the voice is lowering if unless you take hormone replacements. As you take estrogen at menopause, the voice, the whole body can change. It can masculinize. Your range drops. I had a woman who she had been a coloratura soprano opera singer, and when she hit menopause, she said her voice dropped an octave and a half. And, but she had a really positive spin on it. She said, "But you know what? I can sing all that jazz stuff I really wanted to sing, and I really couldn't do it before." I went, "Yes." Looking for the blessing, looking for the glass apple. What were you going to say, Philippe?
just had a question. I know you have something you want to share, so we're gonna
Yes,
wrap this
there
up
would
in
be
about
other jobs,
15 minutes. But
other jobs, and it's in the book. They're in the book, but other jobs, because people go, what am I doing? Am I wasting my time? Not necessarily. It depends on what you're willing to do for work and what you're not willing to do.
mm,
And so, besides cruise ships and cover bands, I have a student now, and she doesn't do well. She does cover bands, but she's in a band. They do corporate events, they
mm-hmm.
do weddings, they do bat and bar mitzvahs, and it's how she makes her living. She's in four bands, four cover bands, and some of them are pretty big bands. They might have a horn section, uh, definitely a combo, and she's got the outfits, and so this is how she lives, and she's happy with it. I have another friend who I just met last week who was a jazz singer. I met her when she was a jazz singer, and I was so inspired by her. She didn't know anything about music, what we think of as music theory or music, but in the 80s when I saw her perform, I was in college then, and I guess it was actually, yeah, about 1980, and I couldn't believe how fabulous she was. All the stuff she was doing, I didn't wasn't getting taught at college because I was doing classical. The way she interacted with the audience. That's a real gift. How you rib your musicians, how you do the set list. All of these things are so important when you're a live performer. You don't just go up there and sound good.
Yeah.
Um, she the way she improvised, the way she would do these standards, and every time she did them, she would do them differently. I just was awestruck. I've been friends with her ever since, and she's going to be performing at a five-star hotel in a lounge coming up. So she's in her 70s, but she's still getting work because she's famous in the city that she's in, which, by the way, can be really helpful, when you're in a small town and you are the go-to person for gigs. um, she doesn't have a manager. She just, she'll actually reach out to them and say, here's who I am, here's my website, here's my press kit, my digital press kit, and she still gets work. Another person I interviewed, I think is in the book, was if you're a hotel singer at international hotels.
Mm,
Again, they need a contract, but you can sing in the lobby, or you can sing if it's a dance gig, like some like in Hong Kong,
mm,
in Asia. They have these rooms where um, they're doing like more dancey disco stuff, and then so they might have multiple ways for people to make a living. And There's some pros and cons to it. You know, you are living in a hotel room, but I hear that the hotel rooms at these five-star hotels are very nice. You get your food comped. You're socking away your money if you can sublet your apartment, if you have rent an apartment. Um, there are some issues with smoke because the audience often will be smoking. So, and you have to get your clothes cleaned because you get smoke in it. I mean, it's just all to me fascinating stuff. Also, there's you might get hit if you're a beautiful woman, you might get hit on a lot, and that could be a problem if you don't know how to handle it. But the gal I spoke to not only had a contract, I think she had a 3-month contract in Hong Kong, but in the evening she'd go to a small little like restaurant club where all the other expat musicians would go, and she would just sing with them and have a great time. So live music is more common in outside the US than it used to be. It used to be that you could be in a club band and you were this restaurant's club band. You were the band and you played several nights a week and for forever. And we don't have as much live music. DJs it was cheaper to hire a DJ or just pipe in music on the speakers. So there's less of that work. But internationally, there still exists work, from what I'm told, for live cover bands. There's also tribute bands. I just last week sang with a Zappa tribute band, a really, really good one called Stinkfoot Orchestra, 14 piece with a horn section. And though for most of them it's a labor of love, they're San Francisco based. Um, for some, I'm sure there's some money coming in when they tour, and they had two terrific backup singers, and I came in as having performed and recorded with Frank Zappa. I came. They invited me to come and sit in, and I did my infamous song. Well, third time I've ever performed in my whole life. And there were people there who had seen me perform it live in 1981, and they were people were lining up for autographs and photos, and it was very, very nice for my ego to feel that I could still sing and that I could still put on a show, and that it meant something to people, that it's important to me that, and I think a lot of people feel this way, that you want to give, we're in the happiness business as teachers and as performers. You want to uplift people, and it's so important when you're working on your own voice to have that goal in mind too, not just
Yeah.
how do I pay the rent, but how do I create an impression? How do I make people, somebody who's depressed, um, uh, brighten their spirits, give them something to look forward to. Always be kind to the people who think you're wonderful. Develop your fans and do extras for them. Always go out of your way for your fans. They will repay you in kind. Plus, some of them are just really nice people. You'll meet a couple of wackos along the way, but I've never had a problem. I mean, even though I had one guy from Germany write me once years ago, I cut your picture out of a magazine and taped it to my ceiling. It's like, okay, that's creepy, but he's not flying to Los Angeles with a knife anytime soon. So it never was a.
That's very funny. Yeah, it's the real essence. Remember why you're singing in the first place. You're singing because you heard something that inspired you, and you actually the real desire. You want to do the same thing. You want to feel that feeling again. And when you hear the music and sing the music, first you're feeling that feeling again. You're recreating that, but you're also passing it on. It is a labor of love and joy. So enjoy it. If you're not enjoying it, it's no fun anymore.
And there's so
Let's
many
enjoy
people who
it.
would be us. They're people who have no talent for music. They are sometimes the biggest fans of all, the most devoted fans, because we can do this magical thing that they can't do. They can specialize in other things, but the super fans out there, they are not. usually musicians. Otherwise, musicians will sit there and critique a show. Well, they were a little bit, late on that entrance. But the non-musician thinks it's all so glorious and makes living worthwhile. And I've seen super fans, not mine. I don't have super fans, but I've been with artists who do, and I've got to learn about the super fans, and they're just so lovely, and they so appreciate every little bit of knowledge they have about you, and what you like and what your life is like and what you're working on now, and they just know they'll love it. Whatever you do, they're just going to love. And that's a kind of a responsibility too, once you have developed fans,
Yeah.
is to consistently deliver, and then you have a relationship with them on some level for the rest of your lives. That's very nice.
Yes, it is. I want to share something here as we wrap things up. Always great to have you, Lisa. There's always so many things to talk about with somebody that has had so much international experience. I in my career have done most of those things that Lisa has talked about today. So this is a great start to your information, and it's wonderful you've compiled that in a book. I'll get the link for you so you can get that free download and put that in the description. As an artist, as a performer, I hope you feel inspired that there are so many ways that you can participate in the business of entertainment and doing it your way. And that varies from being an international traveling artist to being just doing gigs and weddings and little things in your own hometown where people appreciate you and you are making a difference. So you can make a living in the business. You don't need to be a superstar international to feel successful or good about yourself. You just find your niche and find what inspires you and share that. There are a lot of ways, and the more you do, the more that will expand. And for any singer listening, because Lisa did mention it earlier, and I do agree, to work as a cover band singer, which there are loads of cover bands looking for good singers, you do need to have about 200 songs. And you might think that's totally unachievable. The reality is you know none of them, and you will not build that in a month. But you can learn a lot of songs quickly. You start with one set. You need 45 minutes of music, learn your 10, 12 songs. Then you'll move on to the next 10, 12 songs. And after maybe 6 months, you'll be sitting on 200 songs. Maybe they're not all perfect yet, but you'll be familiar enough to be up there with the iPad and lyrics and jump in and gig. So you can do it. It doesn't happen overnight. Take it step by step. Lisa, is there anything you'd like to share as we wrap things up
Yes,
here?
just one more idea for that I think is useful. And I always appreciate everything you say. But this idea that there are basically three ways to approach one's involvement with music. One is professional, and that's the one we aspire to, um, because of this, the glamour, the love, being able to work. One of the reasons I wanted to be successful is I wanted to work with the very top people in the music
Yes.
industry, and I wanted them to take my call. Um, so that was a big thing for me. I mean, I wanted to work with so and so and so and so and so and so. So that's professional. And then we've got sort of hobbyist, and that's just someone who loves music and who loves playing music on occasion. But there's a third category that I really want to promote this term, and it's called avocation. Avocation, meaning you've got your day gig, and that's how you live well, and you have a nice car, and you eat nice food. But avocation means you have a passion, and you have a specific amount of time in your week where you do music. You're in a band, you're rehearsing with a band, you're doing, your band is playing at a local restaurant in such and such a town. But knowing where, having the relief that your life doesn't, financial life doesn't depend on it, but it accepts that you have a passion for it and you can be at a super high level. So I just wanted to throw that word out there, that just because you're not professional doesn't mean you're a hobbyist. You could be an avocational musician. And one last comment: the more you know about recording, electronics, video production, songwriting, music theory, playing at least one instrument somewhat with some fluidity, typically it's piano or keyboard or guitar. Um, uh, these things are going to serve you, because when you get an opportunity, you're less likely to embarrass yourself. Like, well, I don't know what a quarter note is, or I don't know what the key of E means. I don't know what a perfect fourth is. So having basic music theory, basic music skills, it's not hard. I teach it, and I love to teach basic music theory because I have a system. Instead of just going right to chords like they do in guitar, I start at the bottom and then sort of, so there's aren't these big scary holes in one's knowledge. So, and the more you dance and acting and languages and anything you can think of that is creative, art, drawing, graphic design, social media mastery, all of these things should be part of your package of what you can provide as you are out there working with professionals or just your friends, doing your rehearsals. You want to be the go-to person because you love all of it. It's all connected. It's not one or the other. The more you know, the more valuable you are. That's what I'm trying to say.
That's perfect, and you're a perfect example of that. It depends on how you view the situation or view all of this. If you just look at it from the standpoint that I'm enjoying this process, and there's all these things I'm enjoying learning, they become part of you. If you look at it as something that's in the way of you achieving your goal, it's hard work. But everything Lisa just described is basically saying every asset that you bring makes you a unique artist, and you will continue to evolve, and just enjoy that process. Enjoy that process. Lisa, it's been fantastic. Thank you so much for your time today.
My
Really
thanks.
appreciate it. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. And please reach out to Lisa and myself with any questions you may have. That's what we do. We really are invested in helping singers and helping you take the next steps along your journey. Have a great day, everyone. We'll see
Bye,
you next time.
everybody.
See you next time on The Voice Vibe. Bye bye.